we keep moving right along and we go into our next section, which is disability income. Now, before we get into the section, what I'm going to do is do a kind of a broad overview of the way that the policy works and the different features of the policy so that we kind of get a comprehensive overview and a visual of if we were to buy a policy in this situation, how would it work? Because you're going to have some detailed questions directly on this policy on your exam. So remember, if they ask a question about disability income, they're asking a specific question about a policy that replaces your lost wages if you are unable to work because of a disability. So this section, that's what we're going to be covering specifically. So pretty detailed. A lot of stuff on disability income. So we'll start out talking about how an individual policy. Remember, you could have this in a group policy or you could have it as an individual. But we'll start out talking about an individual disability income policy. First thing we'll mention is, in an individual, we insure our net earned income because when we're eligible for benefits, benefits are not taxable. Okay, so to reiterate that so that we understand that for sure, if it's an individual disability income policy, our benefits are not taxable. So we insure our net earned income after tax. Now notice I say earned income from our job. You cannot insure investment income such as income from rental property or income from the stock market. This has to be earned income from wages. So if a person comes in and wants to buy a policy, what's the insurance company going to want to see? Paychecks, 1099s, okay, tax returns. The insurance company wants to make sure that they're insuring this person's wages. Remember, we don't want them to profit. This policy follows principle of indemnity. Can't profit from your loss. Insurance policy will pay your loss or the policy limit, whichever the two is less. Okay, we're replacing lost wages here. Okay, so we talk about that. We're insuring our net earned income. Now, when we buy the policy, we have to specify a definition of total disability. Now, remember earlier we talked about this. We buy the policy. We have to know, well, how are we going to get paid? Well, we have to become disabled. Well, what's the definition of disability? Well, when you buy the policy, you actually specify what you want the definition of total disability to be. So we'll say that we use the typical definition, which we talked about earlier. And the typical definition for the first 2 years states we are totally disabled if we cannot perform our own job. After 2 years, if we're still totally disabled, we are still considered to be totally disabled if we cannot perform any job, which we are suited to do by prior education, training, or experience. So, let's see how this definition works. Now, how do we prove this? How do we prove we meet our definition? Remember, we've got to go see the insurance company's doctor. We have to go do a physical exam and prove to that doctor that we are totally disabled. Okay, so I say, hey, I've got a claim, I'm totally disabled here. Well, the insurance company will say, okay, we'll go see our doctor and we'll see about that. So I do. Here's my definition. I have the typical definition of total disability. States, during the first 2 years of my disability, I am totally disabled if I cannot perform my own job. So here's what I have to prove. My disability, whatever it may be, causes me to be unable to perform one job. Whatever job I was doing when I became disabled, my own job. If whatever my disability is causes me to be unable to perform my own job, the one job, then I would receive benefits. Okay? So let's say I do. Okay, my disability causes me to be able to perform my own job. And we'll say it's a total permanent disability, I'm never going to recover from it. After 2 years of disability, I have to go back to the doctor. Why? Because I have to prove that I meet this definition. Under the typical definition of total disability, which this is standard industry-wide typical definition, after 2 years, the definition changes from own occupation to any occupation that I'm suited to do by prior education, training, or experience. So, which part of this typical definition is going to be harder to prove that I meet? Which definition is going to be harder to become eligible for benefits? Own job or occupation, or any job or occupation? Answer is any job or occupation. Up here, how many jobs do I have to prove the disability caused me to be unable to do? One job. Down here, I have to prove that the disability causes me to be unable to perform any job that I'm suited to do by prior training, education, or experience. So down here, this might be 15 different jobs. And only if I can prove that I cannot perform any of those 15 will I continue to receive benefits. So let's give an example similar to what they do in the book. I am a dentist, okay, and I run my own practice. I have this policy, disability income, because I'm worried about becoming disabled and going broke. So I buy the policy with the typical definition. Remember, the better my definition, the higher my premium is going to be. So we'll say I pick typical. Okay, I get involved in a motorcycle accident and become paralyzed and can no longer move my arms. Now, what was I doing when I became disabled? I was a dentist. Can I continue to be a dentist? No. So I meet this definition. Start receiving benefits. And after the 2 years, my definition changes, so I cannot perform any job I'm suited to do by prior education, training, experience. Can I do anything? Well, here's what I do. I start my own dental lab where we make crowns, bridges, all types of stuff that we sell directly to dentists. Now, was I suited to do that by my prior education and training experience? Yes. So if I do this, after the first 2 years, I do not meet this definition, therefore benefits would stop. Now, however, back up here, if I started my own dental lab in those first 2 years, I still meet this definition because, remember, I cannot be a dentist. I never will be able to be a dentist again. Okay? The definition's very important and will determine whether I'm going to get benefits or not. Do I meet the definition? Yes or no. And keep in mind, this is not insurance because I don't want to work. Like, you know, I go to the doctor and I'm disabled. I could still work. Maybe I can't do the same job I did before, but I have the ability to do other jobs. I just don't want to. Who cares? This isn't you don't want to work insurance. This is you are physically incapable of working. Therefore, you can't. Okay? It's not you don't want to insurance, it's you can't insurance. And further, you can't and you meet the definition. You do both those, then you're going to receive benefits. Okay? So now there's a number of different ways that the definition could be written. So say we selected this definition. We are considered totally disabled if we are confined in the hospital. Well, is that going to be an expensive definition or a cheap definition? What do you think? What's the likelihood if we become disabled that we're going to be confined in the hospital? Is it very high? No. Further, you know, confined in the hospital, you'd have to be in a coma pretty much to be confined in the hospital. I had a friend I grew up with since I was just a little kid, and his father was on vacation out swimming in the ocean, and a wave drove him headfirst into a sandbar, and he became a quadriplegic. He was not confined in a hospital. Okay, he was at home, and he had a wheelchair. He could move around. His apparatus, they fit to his chin. He could move his wheelchair around so he could move around and still do things as a quadriplegic. Well, if he had this policy and this was his definition, he's not getting benefits because he's not confined in a hospital. How about Christopher Reeves? He was in that same situation. Was he confined in a hospital? No. Okay, so if you select that, that's great, but, and it's going to be very cheap in your premium, but it's very unlikely you'd ever receive benefits, even if you became disabled and couldn't work. Okay? So the definition you pick, better it is, higher your premium is going to be. It's going to determine whether or not you're going to receive benefits, yes or no. Okay, now beyond that, beyond the definition, okay, so we'll take this stuff off there. We know we've got to pick our definition of total disability, which is very important. Okay, so we not only do that, but also we have to select what's referred to as a waiting period. And this waiting period is also referred to as an elimination period. And the elimination or waiting period is a number of days that I have to wait. And this starts when I meet my definition of total disability in my policy. And it'll range anywhere from 7 to 180 days, depending on the policy. Commonly an individual, we're talking 30 to 90 days. So let's see how this works, okay? Well, let's say I come in to buy this policy from you, and you're explaining this to me and I don't quite understand. And you say, well, Scott, how about this? If you became disabled today and you could no longer work, how long would you be able to pay your bills from your savings? And I get my wallet out and I've got $2 in there and I say, well, 2 days. And you say, okay, well, you're going to want a short waiting period. Why? Because it's a period of time where you have to pay your expenses from your own money. It starts when you meet your definition in your policy. So let's give an example. Say I follow your guidelines, and within 30 to 90 days what your company offers, I select a short waiting period, 30 days. I become disabled for 60 days. How many days of benefits will I be paid for? Answer, 30. Because this waiting period starts the day I become disabled. It is not retroactive. It's truly a period of time where I have to pay for my expenses from my savings. I'm waiting for benefits to become available. Starts when I meet my definition in my policy. Shorter the waiting period, though, here's the problem for me, since I don't have a lot of money. Shorter the waiting period, the higher the premium is going to be. Now, say this, though. Say I select that 30-day waiting period, and I become disabled for 15 days. Will I receive any benefits? No. Okay, so waiting period. Now, once I become eligible for benefits, benefits out of the disability income policy have to be paid at least monthly by law. They have to be paid. They can be paid more frequently, weekly, every other week, every 3 weeks, but they have to be paid at least monthly, because remember, this person's using this to pay their expenses. Okay, so that's waiting period, also known as elimination period, has absolutely nothing to do with the probationary period. Okay, remember, probationary period applied to pre-existing conditions. Waiting period, elimination period, a number of days you have to wait until you start receiving benefits starts when you meet your definition in your policy. Shorter it is, the higher your premium is going to be. Okay, so we had that. The last thing we have to select from is called a benefit period. This is how long we get paid for. Okay, this could go up to a lifetime. But, common, 6 months, 2 years, could be 10 years. This is how long we get paid for. So, once we become disabled and we meet our definition, and we go through our waiting period, we start getting paid. As long as we remain totally disabled, the insurance company will continue to pay us that monthly benefit for a maximum of our benefit period, however long it is. So the longer our benefit period is, the higher our premium is going to be. Could be lifetime, till we die. Could be to age 65. Could be short term, maybe 6 months, 2 years. It depends on the policy. Group, a lot of times you see short term disability benefit coverage. Individual, you see long term. Long term being anything longer than 2 years. And short term being anything up to 2 years. Okay, so these are the things we have to select from on our individual policy. Okay. So from that, we'll go ahead and take a look at the book. We'll come back a little bit later on the board with something else, but here's a good point to get in the book. On page 129, top of the page, we have total disability. States, disability income insurance protects against your loss of net earned income. Remember, individual, we say we insure net because benefits are not taxable. In the event you should become totally disabled due to the perils of sickness or accident. This type of insurance policy is designed to pay a weekly or monthly income to replace lost salary or wages due to the insured's inability to work. Remember, we said it has to be paid at least monthly. Next paragraph, most typical definition of total disability. Highlight, star this. We said you have to pick your definition. Here's the typical definition. States you are considered to be totally disabled if you cannot perform your own job for the first 2 years after onset of your sickness or injury. Thereafter, after 2 years, in order for benefits to continue, you must prove to the insurance company that you are incapable of performing any job for which you are reasonably suited by education, training, or experience. This is the loss of earnings test for total disability. It says in the next paragraph, definition varies substantially by company, and then they give some examples. Next paragraph says your disability must be medically defined. The doctor has to be able to put some medical terminology to the disability, whatever it may be. And remember, in certain situations, the insurance company will require you every 6 months to go back and prove you're still totally disabled by seeing their doctor. Now, at the bottom of the page, we have different degrees of disability. We have presumptive disabilities, which are going to be the highest degree of disability. This is the most severe, permanent disability, presumptive. And I refer to this generally as the loss of twos to help you remember. So it says, continuing total disability that is presumed in cases involving loss of sight, hearing, speech, or the loss of any two limbs. So the loss of hearing in both ears, sight in both eyes, 2 arms, 2 legs, or an arm and a leg, or speech. So for the most part, unless you have 2 mouths, that's going to be the loss of twos. So that should help you remember that. Permanent, never recover from it. Presumptive, most severe, and in a lot of situations they will waive, obviously they're going to waive the physical exam situation. You lose both arms. They're not going to have you go back to the doctor and say, you know, doctor won't say, take your shirt off, have they grown back yet? Well, obviously not. That's a waste of money, right? That's stupid. So we're not going to have you do that. Also with a presumptive, a lot of times, depending on your benefit period, they might just cut you a lump sum check. They'll say, hey, we know you meet your definition. You're always going to meet the definition. So instead of paying you out over 20 years, will you take a cash settlement up front at a reduced amount? The insurance company would do this, obviously, to try and save money. So we've got the presumptives, referred to loss of twos. Then we have the permanent disabilities. So this is, again, something you will never recover from, not as severe. You lose 1 leg, 1 arm, hearing in 1 ear, sight in 1 eye, and so on. And then we have temporary disabilities. So this would be you injure your back, break your leg, you get valley fever. At some point you will fully recover. That's a temporary disability. Okay, bottom of page 129. Now, if you become disabled in an accident, it may be covered or it may not be covered. It depends on if what you did was intentional or not. So when you buy your policy will include one of these next 2 provisions that state if you become disabled in an accident, are you covered or not? So the first one we have at the bottom of the page on 129, last paragraph, says accidental means clause. States, this is more restrictive. If you meant to do whatever caused your injury, it's not going to be covered. So I'll give you a short example here. Let's say that I'm at home on the weekend and my 2 sons are out front throwing the football around and the satellite dish is, you know, not coming in so clear, so I go up on the roof to fix it. 2-story house, and I'm up on the roof fidgeting around with it, and I decide to go back downstairs and get a beer out of the fridge, and I go to the edge of the roof, to the ladder to go down, and my son Ryder down there says, "Jump, Dad, jump." So I, want to impress him, so I do a backflip off the roof. And instead of landing on my feet, I land on my neck, and I break my neck and become paralyzed. Okay? Now, that was an accident. When I did the backflip off the roof, I intended to land on my feet, but I didn't. Okay? Now, what I did, though, was intentional. Notice I didn't slip off the roof and fall and break my neck. I jumped off the 2-story building and hurt myself. It was intentional what I did. True, it was an accident. I didn't do it intentionally planning to land on my neck, planning to land on my feet. But I did what caused the accident was intentional. I meant to do it. If I had accidental means clause in my policy, my disability from that would not be covered. So let's see what it says there in the paragraph. Example, second sentence. If a policy has an accidental means clause, it will cover accidents only if the cause is unintentional and unforeseen. Very restrictive clause, somewhat rare. Example, working on your roof, finished, you elect to jump down. Since you intended to jump, your injury could have been foreseen. If the policy had accidental means, you would not be covered. Now, the next one, which is more common, is called the accidental bodily injury clause and states any disability caused by an accident will be covered. So my example, I jumped off the roof. I had accidental means clause in my policy. As long as I met my definition in the policy of total disability, I would be covered. Okay, maybe a test question on either one of those 2. We go to the center of page 130. Individual disability income insurance, basic total disability plan. We have number 1, income benefits. Obviously, this is why we bought the policy, to provide loss of our earnings if we became disabled. Number 2, here's where we see the waiting periods. Elimination or waiting period, and also the benefit periods we talked about. Now, The shorter the waiting or elimination period we select, what's going to happen to our premium? It's going to go up. The longer it is, the premium goes down. Now, different when we talk about the benefit period. The shorter the benefit period is, the lower our premium will go. Longer benefit period, the higher the premium will be. So we talked about those as well. Now, it talks about in the next paragraph what's called a recurrent disability. Now, recurrent disability is a disability that recurs within a certain number of days of recovering from that disability. And a recurrent disability is of importance because if your disability is classified as a recurrent disability, they will waive the waiting period. So they give an example there. It says, if a person's disability later arises due to the same cause, it is called a recurrent disability. If the insured, after returning to work for less than a certain period of time, usually 90 days, suffers a recurrence of the same disability, it will be treated as a continuance of the prior claim and no new elimination or waiting period will apply. But as you see there, it would have to recur within a certain period of time. If it doesn't, then you'd have to go through that waiting period again. Number 3, waiver of premium rider. And this is important to add to your policy because it will waive your premium for your insurance policy if you become disabled. So this is a rider we talked about back in life insurance, but you can apply it to any policy here in health insurance as well. If you become disabled, there's a 6-month waiting period where you have to pay your premium. At the end of the 6 months, it pays you back those premiums and waives your ongoing premiums into the future. So you have free insurance while you remain totally disabled. Waiver of premium rider, it's called.